Hello, welcome to Model Kit Stuff. My name is Jason and this, believe it or not, is a first impressions video. And it's a first impressions video like no other. Firstly, it's a double bill, and secondly, it needs an introduction. So I need to do a bit of a preamble to this first impressions video so you understand the background. And we're going to start right back with my very first model kit. My very first model kit was an FT.17 scale Spitfire, and I believe I was 5. It was my 5th birthday, and my dad bought it for me, and we sat there and we made it together. So I sort of helped my dad to build it, and then we painted it all over in blue, and I can remember it now. It was the Spitfire with Polish markings, had the little red and white check square on it, and I think it was a new tool in 75. But yeah, pretty basic. And from that moment on, I was hooked. Now I can't remember exactly my order of model kits from that point on, but I know that what I started doing was building airfix ships. And one way or another, over the next few years, I built every 1/600 airfix kit I could get hold of. I'm fairly sure that I built most of them, of the warships. Now, as I got to around about 8 or 9, I started getting pocket money, and a model shop, or a toy shop, I suppose I should say, opened up in the village where I lived in Cheshire, and they stocked Matchbox, and Matchbox were doing these amazing kits that had a diorama base. And that's the moment I diverged away from ships, and I pretty much exclusively built ships. And with my pocket money, I would save up and buy a Matchbox kit, and I'd go down and have a look, how much money have I got, what have they got, buy one and away again. And this shop only stocked model kits by Matchbox. So that was my shoehorn into Matchbox, probably around 1978, 1979 box. And I set out to build every 176 vehicle diorama. I remember. What was interesting with the Matchbox stuff is I remember the kits by the dioramas, couldn't tell you which vehicles are built, but I know exactly, I remember every single diorama base, and sometimes that reminds you what the vehicle was. So the Priest was on a little bit of a ploughed field, and I remember thinking the base was a bit small for the model, for example. But there was a corner which had a ruined building on it and a golden eagle on it, and I remember that base. And even once, because you play with the models because you were younger, even once those models are broken down a bit, you kept the bases, you repainted them, used them for other things. My favourite of all the Matchbox vehicles that came with a diorama base was the German self-propelled gun, sat on a dried lake bed in the desert bed with a palm tree and someone with binoculars looking out. I absolutely loved that. It totally captured the imagination. So, recently, Peter Oxley, if you follow his channel, you'll know this, has been doing more and more about Matchbox. He's always been clearly a Matchbox fan, and he's done a number of Matchbox videos over time, and recently he's done some sort of general remembering Matchbox videos, and it reminded me that there is one armoured vehicle diorama that I never built. So I have unfinished business with Matchbox, and in this first impressions video we're going to take a look at that. We're also going to take a look at an aeroplane from Matchbox as well. Today we're going to take a closer look at the one I never built. We're going to write that wrong and I'm going to build it. And I don't care what Peter says about not building the originals and getting the Revel ones. I'm going to build this one. It's an original in its original packaging, and we'll take a closer look at that in a minute. Now, the other one we're going to have a look at today is this fairy Seafox, and this one is totally mint, so much so that it was still in its cellophane wrapper up until a few minutes ago when I filmed the first impressions part of it, and we'll have a look inside together. The first people to have looked at this since it came out of the factory, and we'll do all that together. Why this one? It's fairy. I used to work at Fairy, and because of the way my brain works, I want to build all the fairy aircraft that I can get as a model kit. So without further ado, let's have a look at these two Matchbox kits. Now, if you know anything about the history of Matchbox, you will know the one or two tips for dating their kits. Now, this was a brand new tool in 1983, so this was new on the market when I first got it. And in fact, this is a 1983 version. As you can see, it's still in its cellophane. It's never been opened since it left the factory, which is a real crime, and we're going to solve that in a minute. So I know this is a 1983 one because of the part code, which is PK-36. So the part coding configuration changes when they re-release their kits later on. So this also got re-released in 92. Then they did a different version in 96 with different decals. They did another version in 1997 which had paint and brushes, and then as late as 2007 Revell issued this in a different box, but it is the 1983 kit. So let's have a look at the box. So we have this lovely piece of artwork which was used for two of the boxings. So the first two boxings had this on, and actually the only real difference between this and the 1992 boxing is really that the part code and one or two layout format differences, but not much. So on the front it tells us it's 172 and that we've got two colours of plastic in, which many of you, I'm guessing, will know was a Matchbox thing to have multiple colours. On the side we get a different picture, and that is the one that I think gets used quite a bit on other boxes. We've got the two colour logo there and a drawing of the kit on its floats there. Got the same on this side, has the part number on the two sides, and then on this end here it tells us we've got two red dots. That means it's a skill level 2, 1 being the simplest, 4 being the hardest. And then we've got copyright 1983 Matchbox International. So yeah, everything we need to know. And then if we look on the back, we have two painting options, so that's really good, and a barcode. So yeah, Matchbox were cutting edge in 1983. Right, so let's do what should have been done when this kit was originally purchased. Let's open it up and take a look inside. I'm going to do this carefully because I don't want to damage the box. There you go, we are in. So no one has set eyes on what's in this box for 39 years. 39 years. I'm starting to feel old when I say things like that. And once we get the wrapping off, we've got a lovely Matchbox that's an end opener. And there we go. That is everything out of the box. So no bag inside. That brings back some memories, that does. So there's the parts as they were originally put in. So let's start with the clear parts because they're on top. So we have one clear sprue with 3 canopy sections. The plastic is pretty thick, but actually not too bad. There is a bit of distortion in it, but again, that's not too bad either. And it's relatively clear. I've seen worse. I've definitely seen better as well. That's not bad. That's not bad for 40 years old, 39 years old. Then we have a green sprue. It says on the back here, made in England, has the part code PK38. And inside we have that Lesney Products PLC 1982 Matchbox, and takes you back to the period where the part numbers on the big parts are actually printed on the part there. Lovely. And then as we turn it over, we've got, as you would expect, raised panel lines, but they are nicely done. Detail is soft moulded, as we would expect, but we've got detail there. We've got the little foothold plate areas there. We've got some fastener detail on there. We've got texture on the tail, single piece tail. No sink in that though. Little bit of sink there, not much. We've got the 2 floats. They have sink in them and not much in the way of detail. But look nice enough. This fuselage half here has got quite a bit of scratching on it. I guess almost inevitable with it being in that box for all that time. It's been moved around. And then we've got the supports, and yeah, flash free, very crisp. Bit of flash on these supports here. And you can see there's some internal detail there. That's our green sprue. And then we have, okay, what's that? Is that silver? I don't know what that is. Pearl shell? I don't know, that's an odd looking colour. So we've got wings on here, solid wings. We do have texture on though, and we've got countersunk lines there for the flaps, so that's nice actually. Those strips will be for the top of the floats, so we do have detail on the upper surface there.
I think that is the engine section with the propeller in front of it, and we have the propeller moulded onto a spinner. Very basic seats. No sink in the tail though, and 2 pilots. That would have been expensive to do. And then that'll be the little spinner for that. I'm quite sure what that is. See the little lines there ready for the supports. And there's our 2 pilots. Okay, let's have a look at our decals. So they have yellowed quite heavily. So we've got paint option 1, paint option 2, and then common to both. So very much like Airfix would do, or still do. There is a lot of carrier film on them. There's big margins. Yeah, a lot of carrier film on those. And it's very yellow, and we just don't get enough sunshine in this country to whiten those up. So I might have to see if we can get some replacement decals for that maybe. I will stick them to the window and see what happens though. Interestingly, the protective sheet was underneath the decals, and we know that's not something someone else has done. Actually, it's too short for the decal sheet anyway. And then we have our instructions, which aren't too bad actually, because they've been in the box. They are quite nice and fresh and white. So we start with our paints. Just going to have a quick look at this. Right at the top we've got a key. Triangle is matte, diamond is semi-gloss, square is gloss, and circular is metallic. So they then use that key along with a letter to tell you what paint colour to use. So we then have that in different nationalities. So it's not referring to a brand, it's just giving you a colour name: flesh, khaki, leather, yellow, sea grey, medium, aircraft grey, green, so on and so forth. So yeah, and then we have a little bit of history in several languages, and specification of the aircraft, some technical details. And then we open it up, and there's our build instructions, which is not quite all of it. So let's have a look. These are nice and clear, just how I remember them. It takes me back. So step 1, pilot in chair ×2. Step 2, build up the spinner. So we're doing sub-assemblies, telling us not to glue there. There's a little key at the top, sorry I forgot to mention. Step 3, the numbers are in stars, and as a kid I always used to think they looked like those sail flashes that you used to get in Woolworths. But yeah, the toy shop down the road from me was absolutely rammed with Matchbox kits. Let's see, building up 2 sides of the float. Don't appear to be putting the top bit on there though. Then we're putting the pilots in the fuselage, so no cockpit detail at all. And the fuselage is together, building up the tail and tail wheel structure without the tail wheel. We've got a machine gun to go on the back there. Did I see a machine? Ah, tell you what that is. That's the little thing we looked at and I wondered what it was. Now I know it's a machine gun. I can see it's a machine gun. And the front windscreen going on, and then we have radiator in the top and our sub-assembly from step 2 going in. So the main aircraft builds up fairly quickly. Step 5 and we're done with that bit. Then the fuselage supports for the upper wing, and it's nice they're showing you pictures there of how that should orientate, so that's really nicely done, nice and easy to follow. Then we're adding the upper wing, then we're adding the supports for the lower wings, and then lower wings are going on. Right, then we're building up the support frame and the upper part of the floats. They actually go onto the underside of the aircraft, and then some more supports go in. And then as we go over the page, we finally have the floats that we made right near the start. Radio antenna and the rest of the cockpit, and then we have an option if you don't want the machine gun in, there's a little blanking plate, so that's nicely thought out. And then what have we got here? Paint instructions. So option 1, HMS Asturias, and then the other one is 713 try reading it the right way around. We've got 713 Catapult Flight HMS Athusia and 702 Squadron FAA HMS Asturias. So 2 different paint options, showing you where to put your decals on your 2 different paint options. You've got camouflage plan there for this one, not for that lower one, and then the common marking decals there. So quite small, but I like the way they've broken it down. As a kid, I found these instructions easy to follow, and there is nothing in there that's particularly taxing. Right, we want to put this lot away, so we will put our decals inside, and we will separate the 2 kit parts with the instructions and plop it back in the box. That is my fairy. Oh, there we have it, the Matchbox Fairy Seafox. You don't see much in the way of Seafoxes around, although I have to say I don't go out looking for them particularly. It was a fun build when I was a kid, and I think this would still be a fun build now. So one weekend when I fancy a change of pace, this is what I will crack open. And then that's another model rescued from never having been built. It's got to achieve its potential, and let's see how nice a kit we can make out of it. Well, there you have it. If you're interested in old Matchbox kit, you could do a lot worse than this one, definitely. So the one that got away, I can't really tell you why I never built this, other than clearly it was never in the shop for me to get it at the time I would have wanted to buy it. How it worked is I'd go into the shop and have a look at all the model kits, then have a look at all the model kits again, and then have a look at all the model kits again, and finally make a decision. It was a case of this was one that I suppose I least wanted to build. There was always something else that I preferred to buy to this one. So I never bought it, and then I couldn't get hold of it, and so it dropped off. once I couldn't walk into the shop in my local village and buy a Matchbox kit, I didn't buy any more. The only other Matchbox kit I bought from another shop was the big Corvette, which I bought going into Stockport. But these were in newsagents and places like that, and they just suddenly vanished. And that is why this wouldn't have been built. It would have been built otherwise. So I am going to right that wrong, and at some point we are going to build this, probably as a palette cleanser between builds. I'm actually really looking forward to it. So in some ways we might have saved the best till last. Be interesting to see if I enjoy it as much as I used to as a kid. So let's have a look at what we've got. So firstly, we've got some lovely artwork, and that artwork is the same artwork that it started out with its life on, and then they get reboxed several times, and there's little things that you look out for to understand the age of a Matchbox kit. One of the biggest giveaways is the kit number, which we can see here is 40176. Now, all the original Matchbox releases had a 2-letter prefix, a PK or something like that, dash and then a number. So I know that this is the 1992 rebox of what was originally a 1983 new tool. So that's what we've got. Like I say, the artwork on the front stayed the same, just some of the wording on the box changes, doesn't it? So this is an orange one, which means we've got 3 colours, or I think we should have 3 colours in here. 3 sprues, all different colours is what I'm expecting to see. When we look on the sides, we get a picture of the diorama, which I think confirms the 3 different colours: green, dark grey, light grey. We have a skill level 3, and it says on there, if I just quickly read it, the number indicates the degree of difficulty of the model kit. The scale ranges from 1 simple to 5 difficult. So this was a 3, and I'm fairly sure Revell have them out as 4s. So yeah, which is nonsense. They're not technically difficult. And then the side, we get basically a shelf view of the top on both sides, and then on this side we get a slight variation of the artwork from the front. So we're seeing the tanks from the rear. So the artist had to do several different views. Tells you that it's a model kit, tells you it's 1/76 scale, and this will be interesting to see. So originally it was held down by 2 little adhesive tabs, and it's this side that's been opened before I got it. But this is the first time I've looked in it since this kit arrived on my doorstep. So there we go. We have our 3 sprues, green, brown and sand. So not the colours I was expecting from the box. Rubber band tracks, as we'd expect. These were better than the ones you got from Airfix. The ones you got from Airfix were 4 little pins that went through 4 holes, and you could never line them up. And what you were supposed to do was heat a screwdriver up and melt the little pegs to make rivets, and it didn't really work, and you ended up gluing them and they're falling apart. Whereas these, if you look at these, you'll see they have a little rectangular hole in them, and we have, if I can get that to show up, has a neck and then the track piece, and what you do is you thread it through the hole. See that I just instantly remember how to do that without looking at the instructions. That's how many of these I built. And then seamless. You can't even see where that is. It does leave you a little bit of a neck, so you always used to do it under a tread or somewhere where it is hidden. But that's how you put the rubber band tracks together. And actually, you know, as rubber band tracks go, they're not too bad. They tend to disform a little bit at the gates, but these aren't too bad at all. A bit disformed there. When you've painted them up, they'll look fine. Same with these. And we've got the original part number on there. So kit number, I should say. So originally it was FT.17. But know that Revell have gone around and removed any reference to Matchbox from their from the moulds now. But it's a testament to how good these were that Revell still released them. So before we look at the plastic, let's, as we always do, look at the instructions. We've got some decals there, which is good. So you used to get a big sheet that folded out, and there you go, gatefold sheet. Which is printed on both sides. And we've got our build steps and bits and pieces on one side, and build steps for the other vehicle and the diorama. And on the other side, we've got the painting instructions and on all the little bits and pieces. So let's have a look at that more closely. So if we start here with the build, we have a simple key at the top. I remember that really clearly. So glue, don't glue. That says alternative part. I wouldn't have remembered that. And that will be an option. So quite simple. You never had to do any drilling or anything like that with these kits. So only a simple key required. It says paint required parts before assembly. Assemble parts in sequence shown. Black numbers in a circle indicate the part number. Black numbers in star indicate completed section. Okay, I'm guessing that's what they mean by the star. So that's your step number effectively, which, you know, makes sense, and that's your part number. So they're not calling out paint colours as you go, which I'd sort of forgotten whether they did or didn't do that, to be honest. Yeah. And then at the bottom there, you see, if you look at first step, there's your step 1. It tells you which model you're building, the Renault FT.17. You've got your instructions there, so don't glue that because you want the turret to spin. And then it lists all the parts to glue. And then in brackets there, don't glue that. So what it's basically saying is 18, you don't glue it to 27, but you do glue it to 77. So I always thought they were clear instructions, and it was Matchbox that taught me to paint everything before I assemble it, and it's still a habit I'm in now. I find it very difficult to do what a lot of people do and build a whole 135 scale tank and then paint it. It's just not the way Matchbox taught me to build a model. Anyhow, we start with the Renault turret, which is going onto the top of the body there. we build the body around it and the underneath, and you can see it's fairly simplified. We'll look at the parts in a minute and get a good view of that. And then in step 3 and step 4, we're building up the different sides of the running gear. So all the wheels there with that sort of unusual large front wheel, drive sprocket at the back, idler at the front. Then we go to fitting some detail parts on in step 5 and 6, and look how clear that is. So if Airfix would say do that on both sides in this day and age, whereas Matchbox were telling you to do this side and then they'll tell you again to do the other side, which is how Airfix would do it now. But at the time, and I'm comparing them to Airfix because Matchbox and Airfix were the two big UK manufacturers, Airfix would have had a much more exploded view of the whole thing, and you might build, well, you'd build the HMS Victory with all its complexity in 2 or 3 steps, whereas this has been really expanded into a lot of steps to make it nice and simple. It was great for kids. So English was always the first column, and it's actually calling out Matchbox paints as well. So Matchbox were like Humbrol paints, they were tinlets. And it says, for true to original painting, we recommend, well, I would debate that, I think, but yeah. So quite a few paints called out, so quite a busy build in many ways. And they are trying to make it fairly accurate, but we'll have a look at the plastic parts and get a view on that. Let's look at the plastic. Actually, let's look at the decals. And with this being a 92 release, the decals aren't too bad. They haven't yellowed. There's a lot of backing film on these decals. There always was. I don't remember having much issue with silvering. I mean, I would have put these on back in the day just using water, no setting solutions or anything like that. But yeah, they're not a bad set of decals. So they're divided up, you can see, by these little dotted lines, so that if I'm putting that on, I'm putting all of these on, so on and so forth. So I'm sure that'll all become clear when we study the instructions. So let's have a look. So we've got the familiar rectangular sprue frames, and some of their sprues could be really clever and have parts actually in the sprue edges, but not in this case. So let's have a look. And again, we have the Matchbox reference number PK-176. See that there? So looking at this side, we've got the running gear there. You can see the spring finely moulded. We've got some rivets detail around there. We've even got some rivet detail around the hub. We've got a very thick seam that needs to be cleaned up. It'd be interesting to see what standard I can build one of these to now, because I wouldn't have bothered with too much of that seam removal unless it got in the way of fit in my younger life. Then we've got the handrail thing. There's a bit of flash on there, but nothing major. Lots of raised rivet detail again on the drive sprocket, and the teeth are nice and finely moulded. The gates going on top of the teeth, so when you cut them off, nice and easy to clean. We've got some more running gear there. I mean, look at the level of detail on that. Really cool. Aerial's very thick. You'd want to replace that with a bit of wire these days. Guns are obviously solid, but nicely done. Probably a little bit thick, but overscale was something that was familiar at this period in most kits. Lots of lovely detail on these wheels. And again there. And then there's our exhausts. We'll flip it over. So there's not much in the way of detail on there, but I'm not sure how much of that we're going to see. A little bit of flash, but nothing too major. I think that's the ends of the exhaust that flare. They flare out, don't they? Yeah. Okay, that's the first sprue out of the way. The second one has all the exciting diorama details. So what we've got, and underneath, it always had information underneath, that's why I'm just looking. So we've got Matchbox. It would have said made in England, but somebody has removed that from the tool quite poorly, because you can still see the word England underneath, but somebody has removed that. So clearly this wasn't being made in England in the 90s. But it still says Lesney Products PLC, copyright 1980, and the part number. Now I think all of that is removed these days. So our base has the two different tank tracks marked out in it. So you'll be able to get the rubber tracks to line up with this. This is how clever they were. You'll be able to get the tank tracks to line up to this so that you can park it in the actual track there. Look at that, the spacing is bang on. So wherever you stopped your tank, you could stop it at a point that looked natural. So you can see there where the track's stopping, so you could stop the small one there and it'd look natural, it'd look right. So you've got tank tracks of showing various vehicles have passed, and you've got footprints. So they go all the way along, so wherever you end up putting your two models, you'll be able to see footprints in between them. And then you've got footprints along the wall edge. So all as you'd imagine. And they seem to be going in that direction. So when you build your diorama, you might want to put your tanks in the same direction, or you might want to purposely do it opposite so it looks like the tanks are going in the face of retreating troops. All depends on what it starts to fire up in your mind. Then we've got the figures. So as we saw in the instructions, he's got no feet, so he's limited to the tank. You've got two walking, one stood still, and the tank commander's got a posable arm, which is nice. Then we've got the wall section with this opening, which would be in line with this little step here, and then what is supposed to be double opening wooden doors. And then you've got the ruined building with shutter hanging off and broken brickwork, broken window frame. I mean, we could put some acetate in that, couldn't we? Never did that as a kid. And all the plaster damaged. You've got bullet holes in it. Hey, it's just brilliant. I mean, they've really gone to town on this. Not quite sure what that bit is, but I'm sure it'll become clear. This has got, I hadn't noticed on the other one a sprue number, but this one definitely says sprue C. But they don't reference the sprue letters in the instructions. So there we go. that's all the detail. Actually, quite nicely crisply moulded. I mean, Matchbox figures were always a bit chunky. They're always well fed, shall we say. Not quite sure. They look like padlocks. And you can see, yeah, it's softly moulded, but actually when you paint it all up, it will look tremendous. Okay, I'm just looking for a sprue letter on this, and I can't obviously see one, so a bit random that one of them has and this one doesn't. Anyhow, we've got the other tank parts here now, the smaller tank of the two, is it? Or is this the larger one? No, I think it's bits for both tanks, isn't it? So we've got, I mean, this is the underneath, and it's got rivet detail on it, and it's got a hatch. Now, one of the features of Matchbox kits was when they had raised detail, they really raised it. It wasn't subtle. So you can see there, that hatch there, and if you did that in scale, that's massive. And you can see it again on this side hatch here. Look how steep it was. It was very prominent when they did it, but I didn't even notice it as a kid. But it's something that they were known for and people talked about at the time. But you know, nothing's perfect. So we've got lovely rivet detail, even though that's the underside and almost definitely won't be seen. You might see a little bit of that area possibly at the right angle. They've put it on there. We've got nice vent detail, nice rivet detail. So you've got scored lines and raised rivet detail, which is nice. It's a little bit of sink in there, but I'm not going to worry. We'll just argue it's a dent. There's a bit of sink in there. The sink was a familiar thing. Well, you got a lot of it in those days, whoever was making a kit. Coupler there. Not quite sure what that bit is. We've got rivets detail on this gun front, and we've got hatches there with handles on and hinges on. There's a little slit there for the viewing port. I mean, I didn't used to do washers when I built Matchbox kits, but I do a wash now. We're going to try and make this really pop. It'll be interesting to see how good we can make one of these old Matchbox kits. There's lots of surface detail on there. Same on these sides. And look how crisp the moulds are. Sturdy. It's quite shiny in places, so definitely something to be washed. Lots of release agent on this. And then we flip it over. There's not much in the way of detail on this side. This is sort of the side you won't see. So that's the side you get your injection marks on. But even then, they're not massive injection marks. Right then, so what were my first impressions of these two kits? Well, right then, Fairy Seafox first. It's simplified in places, and you know what? For the time, it's a good little kit, and there's some nice detail in there. The moulding is crisp, the texturing is good. Better quality than Airfix at the time. We'll come back to that in a sec. So yeah, I have no great issues with it. It's going to be difficult to rig it because it's solid wings, whereas Airfix would have done that. Probably not a solid wings, so you could have drilled holes through the bottom bit and put thread through and glue it in before you put the wing halves together. But we're not going to be able to do that with this. So whether I end up rigging it or not, I don't know. I just want to be able to say I've built every model of a fairy aviation aircraft that's possible. And yeah, I'm going to look forward to building it. It's a lovely crisp moulding, no flash, bits of sink in places and raised panel lines, but nothing that we wouldn't expect. And I mean, they even look like raised lines on the actual artwork, so maybe that's how it was, who knows. But with a little bit of work on the painting, I think that this will look a nice addition to my 172 aircraft display. So I am looking forward to building that. This is a thing of complete beauty and joy. Again, nice and crisp. It's going to be easy to clean up, easy to put together, a bit overscale in places by modern standards, but at the time, who cared? A nice little diorama, and I'm looking forward to finishing my ambition of building every Matchbox armoured fighting vehicle diorama. That will be a lot of fun. Now, interestingly, as I said at the start of this, I'm sort of been inspired or reminded about this unfinished business due to the videos that Peter Oxley's been putting out about his Matchbox memories and Matchbox kits, and he's got tons and tons of them. So if you're interested in Matchbox stuff, and you've not checked him out, do so. He's got some very interesting, fascinating videos on the subject. Now, it turns out that Peter and I lived in the same area for one period of time, and even frequented the same model shop. Isn't it strange that after all these years, somebody that I could have bumped into, don't know that I ever did actually, but could have bumped into in a model shop on a Saturday afternoon, is now inspiring me to build the same kits that we were both buying back in the day. Funny old world, isn't it? Anyway, I hope that was interesting. That is definitely being built some point this year, I would imagine. Not sure about that, but I hope you found it fascinating. Thanks for looking in. Enjoy your modelling. Stay safe, and I will see you very soon.